cold concrete under the soles of his feet as they touched the floor. On tiptoe, he walked over to the metal wash basin toilet. Retrieving his solitary face towel from the iron ringlet over the small sink, he turned on the water and dipped the towel into the small bowl. After running the wet towel over his dark, chiseled features, he brushed his teeth and checked his appearance in the small shaving kit mirror. As he looked into the mirror, the thought of his imminent release came to mind. The broad smile that lit up his face even managed to make it to his eyes. His smile was rarely seen, but it would put the casual onlooker more in mind of an international model than of an inmate in a maximum security prison. With the remnants of his smile still playing at the corners of his mouth, he dropped to the floor and began his morning routine of exercises. After doing 1,000 push-ups, 1,000 sit-ups, and 1,000 stomach crunches, he stood in the middle of his cell, dripping sweat. Even though it had been 10 years since the last time he was able to look at himself in a full-length mirror, he admired his body the best he could under the circumstances. The skinny, lanky kid of 10 years ago had long since been replaced by a powerful human dynamo, his body honed to stiletto-like perfection. Not only had he used the years behind bars to build his body, but he'd stuffed into his mind every bit of information that he could get his hands on. Instead of having his mother scrape together what she could to get him a television set like the other inmates had, he opted to use any monies he received to build his little library. He returned to school and earned his GED, then decided to go even further and attend the college courses offered at the prison. He was awarded a bachelor's degree in constructive sciences and promised himself to return to school someday and get his master's degree, but for now it would have to wait. After completing his calisthenics, J.C. toweled off the sweat he'd worked up and sat down on his bunk. He removed a faded picture from the small wooden shelf he'd built in the woodshop. The shelf was rickety and badly in need of a coat of varnish, but that didn't matter. This bookshelf was a symbol. It was the first thing he'd ever built with his own 2 hands. Holding the picture in the dim light of his cell, he stared at the 4 boys. This picture was the only thing that made him willing to survive any challenge they could put in front of him in one of the toughest penitentiaries in the country. The photograph showed the boys, now men, who were responsible for his decade of incarceration. These men were supposed to be his friends, but they had poisoned the bond of brotherhood with unmeasured treachery. Richard Rich Kid Kidman, Alonzo Zoe Johnson, and Eugene Little G. Pierce. At one time in his life, these 3 men were the closest thing that a man could have to brothers. Now, close to 11 years later, J.C.'s hate for their seditious act had not lessened or dissipated. His hatred had long since blossomed into an intense bonfire of malignancy. J.C. returned the photograph to its place of prominence on his trophy shelf and retrieved his toilet articles from the small steel table attached to the cell wall. There was nothing else to do, so he resigned himself to waiting for the opening of the cell house doors so he could leave his tip for a quick shower and breakfast. The next days of J.C.'s life passed uneventfully. Inmates he'd grown to love and feel a certain amount of kinship for because of their like circumstances knew of his pending release, and many of them wished him well in his return to the outside world. Other convicts emanated jealousy at the fortune of one of their kind being released into society again, but J.C. didn't pay any attention to their envious vibes. He knew better than to feed into their shit. He'd seen inmates only days away from release end up fighting or cutting one of the other inmates and succeed in jagging off their bits. Instead of going home, they ended up in segregation, waiting to see the prison board to find out just how much more time was being added to their sentences. No, J.C. couldn't see himself going that route. As long as none of these haters touched him, he didn't care how mad they were that he was going home.